was, but go ahead.
Yeah, that's true too.
Right.
And so I worked in the area of Manhattan called the Chelsea District, which is around 23rd Street, 9th Avenue. And at the end of the day, I had several ways of getting back home. The easiest and fastest way was a subway, which was a nickel in those days. When I was feeling flush, I might go for a bus for a dime. And then when I was really getting reckless, I would take the Fifth Avenue bus, which was the elite of the buses, was 15 cents. And so I would walk over to Fifth Avenue, take that bus. And it would take me up through all the glamorous parts of Fifth Avenue, past the Empire State Building, past the great stores and things of that sort. And then on 57th Street, it would turn, and this is just the elite part of town.
Sure, right there where the park starts.
Yes, and then this park starts at 59th.
Oh, sorry.
57th, I would turn over, again, the same kind of scene, past Carnegie Hall,
right,
up Columbus Circle. There was no Trump Tower at that time. And on up to about 72nd Street, and go out to Fifth Avenue, out to Riverside Drive, which is another elite area. So for miles after that, you'd have all these wonderful luxury apartment buildings and so on. And finally, around 129th or 30th Street, it would go on a long viaduct. And then it would do a right turn back into the occupied area, and there you'd see the tenements. And I would wonder, why is this? I mean, why this huge disparity? And there was nobody else. There was no other explanation around. There was nothing there other than Marxism. I stumbled across. I had not read Marx, but I bought a secondhand set of encyclopedias, small set, for some ridiculously low price. And I looked up Karl Marx. I'd heard the name, and the stuff that he said seemed to make sense. And then later on, I would get more and more into it. The argument was that the rich had gotten rich by taking from the poor.
Right.
And well, that was one explanation. But what is interesting, there was no other explanation out there really, and that's true largely in our colleges, universities today.
But so by the time you went to Harvard undergrad, you drop out at the age of 16, and you start reading Marx in your late teens.
I start reading Marx, yes, 1949, at age 19.
Age 19. And then you were in the Marine Corps for a couple of years. What was it, 2-3 years?
2 years. It was actually 1 year, 11 months, and 5 days, but who's counting?
But who's counting? All right, so by the time you went to Harvard, you had already become intellectually engaged with Marxism.
Yes.
And Harvard didn't talk you out of it. And the study of economics at Harvard didn't talk you out of it, nor did getting a master's at Columbia, nor did getting a doctorate at Chicago dissuade you from Marxism. Is that? And you studied with Milton Friedman of all people. How could you have sat in Milton Friedman's classroom and remained a Marxist?
Some people are just stubborn. But what really changed me was not the University of Chicago. It was my first job working in a professional capacity for the government. I was a summer intern.
This is after Chicago? Or
No, while I was still a graduate student.
Got it.
And so during the summer vacation, I worked in the U.S. Department of Labor. And I began to realize, from a number of things, that the government is not simply the personification of the general will like Rousseau or others. The government is the government institutions have their own institutional interests. One involved the minimum wage law. I was a big supporter of that. But I also knew that there was an argument that minimum wage laws simply price low-wage workers out of a job. And my first assignment dealt with minimum wages in Puerto Rico. And as I looked at the numbers, I would see as they would jack up the minimum wages, the number of jobs would go down and so forth. But there were two explanations. One was that of the economists, that you price the people out of a job, and the other was that there were hurricanes that had come through Puerto Rico, you see, during the sugar harvesting, and I was studying the sugar industry, and therefore it destroyed a lot of the crop. Therefore, you wouldn't hire as many workers. Now, in Chicago, I had been taught that if there are two different theories, there should be some empirical evidence in principle that could distinguish what would happen under one theory from what would happen under the other.
Right.
And so I wrestled with that for most of the summer. And one morning I came in and I said, I got it. What we need are data on the amount of sugar cane standing in the fields before the hurricane struck. And as I waited for the congratulations, I could see stricken looks around me in the room. Like, this guy has stumbled on something that will ruin us all. You know? And they said, well, we don't have those data. I said, oh, I'll bet the Department of Agriculture has it. He said, well, but that doesn't mean we have it. You'd have to have a request go up the chain of command to the Secretary of Labor. He would then confer with the Secretary of Agriculture. It would come down the chain of command in the Department of Agriculture to whoever has those numbers, and so on. I said, good. Well, they say a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, so I will now submit my request to the Secretary of Labor, which I did. And I am still patiently awaiting this reply.
And the institutional fear of the number was what? That it would...
The U.S. Department of Labor administers the minimum wage law.
I see.
And the money and the careers of perhaps a third or some other significant percentage of the Labor Department's resources come from administering the minimum wage law. One of the real farces of all this is that the law itself, Section 4D, I still remember, requires the Labor Department to study the employment effects of minimum wages. And those studies are absolutely a farce. In fact, some years after I left, I did an article saying why those studies were a farce. And when I came back later on to the Labor Department to do some research, one of the older librarians who remembered me turned to the younger librarian and she said, "This is the man who wrote that article that has everybody up in arms."